Before we begin, if you enjoy these BL storytelling videos and want to support the continuation of this channel, you can join my Patreon, SpicyTimeBL. YouTube doesn't always make it easy to monetize this kind of content, so Patreon really helps me keep creating these stories for you. You can find the link in the description and the pinned comment. And for those of you who want story continuations, bonus scenes, early access, and more uncensored 18+ BL content, SpicyTimeBL is exactly where you can find it. Thank you so much for your support. And now, let's get into the story. I heard the man I loved tell the world I meant absolutely nothing to him. I gave him my time, my energy, the very light from my soul, foolishly believing that the soft way he looked at me in the dark meant he loved me too. But to him, I was just a convenient tool, a temporary fix. So, I packed my shattered heart, vanished into the night, and took his unborn child with me. Welcome back to our storytelling sanctuary. Settle in, take a deep breath, and let's start our story. Julian's mind was a quiet place, in a world full of chaotic magic, where people awakened as powerful, destructive mages who commanded elements and shadows. Julian was just an anchor, and not even a good one. He was a D-rank anchor, meaning his ability to absorb and neutralize the dangerous, corrupting magical feedback known as the blight was incredibly weak. Every time he had tried to bond with a mage at the registry, they would scoff, complain about his low output, and leave him behind. So, Julian accepted his quiet, ordinary life. He ran a small, dusty antique book and tea shop on the rainy outskirts of the city. He spent his days smelling old paper, brewing chamomile, and ignoring the news of the Rift Wars, until the night the shadows came to his door. It had been raining for 3 days straight. I was wiping down the front counter, ready to flip the sign to "closed," when the bell above the door chimed violently. The wind howled, blowing a spray of cold rain across the floorboards. A man stood in the doorway. He was impossibly tall, his broad shoulders filling the frame. He wore a dark trench coat dripping with rain, and his hair, a striking metallic silver, clung to his forehead. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch. They were a piercing, glowing violet, the unmistakable mark of a void weaver, the rarest, most dangerous class of mage. He stumbled forward, leaning heavily against a bookshelf. The air in the shop instantly dropped 10 degrees. I could feel the static of his magic, the heavy, suffocating weight of the blight creeping off his skin like black smoke. He was in the middle of a magical overload. "1 cup of whatever you have," he gritted out, his voice a low, gravelly rasp that sent a shiver straight down my spine. "Sir, I'm closing," I stammered, my heart hammering against my ribs. "And you need a hospital. Or a high-ranking anchor." He didn't listen. He collapsed heavily into one of the velvet reading chairs, a gloved hand pressing against his temple. "Just give me something warm." I hurried to pour the last of the ginger tea from the kettle. My hands were shaking. When I brought the teacup to him, he reached for it, and his bare wrist brushed against my fingers. The reaction was instantaneous. He gasped, a sharp, ragged sound, and his violet eyes snapped wide open, locking onto mine. The black smoke radiating from him vanished. The crushing pressure in the room evaporated into pure, breathable silence. For the first time in my life, my weak anchor energy didn't just flicker. It poured out of me like a warm, golden river, sinking directly into his skin. "How?" he whispered, staring at my hand, as if I had just performed a miracle. "I'm sorry." I pulled my hand back quickly, clutching the tray to my chest. "It was an accident. I didn't mean to initiate contact." "No," he said, standing up. He towered over me, his chest heaving. "Do it again. Please, just for a second. Touch my hand." I hesitated. He looked terrifying, like a predator cornered in an alley, but underneath that, he looked exhausted. A deep, bone-weary exhaustion that I recognized all too well. Slowly, I reached out and let my fingertips rest against his palm. His eyes fluttered closed. A long, shuddering sigh escaped his lips, and the harsh, violent tension in his jaw completely melted away. When he opened his eyes again, the glowing violet had softened to a dark, stormy gray. "Are you an anchor?" he asked, his voice entirely different now, softer, almost vulnerable. "A D rank," I muttered, looking at the floor, barely strong enough to clear a headache. He stared at me for a long time, Then he reached into his coat, pulled out a stack of high-denomination bills, and set them on the table next to the untouched tea. "My name is Kaelen," he said quietly, "and I'll be back tomorrow." I didn't think he actually meant it. Men like him, men who wore custom coats and smelled of ozone, danger, and expensive cedar, didn't come back to dusty bookshops. But the very next morning, before I had even unlocked the front door, Kaelen was standing on the pavement. "I want to hire you," he said, the moment I stepped outside. "Hire me?" I blinked, pulling my cardigan tighter around myself in the chilly morning air. "For what?" "I sell books, Mr. Kaelen." "As my exclusive anchor," he replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I don't care about your rank. I have tried S-rank anchors, and their energy feels like glass scraping against my mind. But your touch gave me the first moment of actual silence I have felt in 10 years. I want a 1-year contract, temporarily. When the year is up, or when I find a permanent bond, I will pay you enough to buy this entire street. Until then, you live with me, and you ground my magic when I ask." Panic flared in my chest. "I can't. I'm a nobody. If your magic overloads, my D-rank core will shatter. I've never been able to handle an Apex Mage." Kaelen took a step closer, the scent of rain and cedar wrapped around me. "I won't let you shatter, Julian," he said softly, somehow already knowing my name. "I will never push you past your limit. Just help me, please." There was that word again, please, from a man who looked like he could level a city block with a single thought. I was drowning in debt, the shop was failing, and I was so incredibly lonely. Looking up into those stormy gray eyes, I found myself nodding. That single nod sealed my fate. Moving into Kaelen's estate felt like stepping into a beautiful frozen tomb. The mansion was vast, all dark wood, cold marble, and towering windows that looked out over the city skyline. But it was empty. No photos, no personal touches. Just the quiet, echoing footsteps of the security detail that guarded the perimeter. For the first few weeks, I barely saw him. Kaelen was the military's prime weapon. He spent his days sealing dimensional rifts, fighting nightmares the rest of us couldn't even comprehend. He would come home late at night, his eyes glowing that dangerous, toxic violet, and he would find me waiting in the library. He never demanded. He would simply walk in, sit on the sofa beside me, and offer his hand. I would take it. I would close my eyes, summon the warm, golden light of my anchor core, and push it gently into his skin. Skin-to-skin contact. It was deeply intimate. I could feel his heartbeat steadying under my fingertips. I could feel the violent, screaming void in his mind slowly hushing to a whisper. We would sit like that for hours, neither of us speaking, just breathing in tandem until he fell asleep, his head eventually dropping to rest against my shoulder. One evening, about 3 months into our arrangement, Kaelen came home early. I was in the grand living room, trying to fix a broken antique clock I had found in the attic. I had tools scattered everywhere, and I accidentally knocked a heavy brass gear onto the floor with a loud, ringing crash. Kaelen appeared in the doorway, his uniform torn, dried blood on his collar. His eyes were burning bright violet. The blight was consuming him. "What are you doing?" he snapped, his voice echoing like thunder. The glass in the windows actually rattled. "Why is there trash all over my floor? I told you to stay quiet. I pay you to stay out of the way." I froze. The coldness in his voice felt like a physical slap. My throat tightened, and tears instantly burned the corners of my eyes. Without a word, I dropped the screwdriver, stood up, and hurried past him, fleeing to my bedroom and locking the door behind me. I slid down the door, pulling my knees to my chest, and cried silently. I knew I was just an employee. I knew he was suffering from magical corruption, but it hurt. It hurt so much because I was already realizing that I cared for him far more than I was supposed to. An hour later, there was a soft knock. "Julian?" Kaelen's voice was muffled, broken. "Please, open the door." I wiped my face and opened it. Kaelen looked devastated. The violet glow was gone, leaving him pale and hollowed out. He didn't cross the threshold. He just stood there, looking at my red-rimmed eyes, his hands trembling at his sides. "I am so sorry," he whispered, running a hand through his silver hair. The void, when I use too much magic, the voices from the rifts, they scream in my head. They make me angry. They make me cruel. But I should never, ever have directed that at you. You are the only good thing in this house. My heart skipped a beat. The only good thing. Before I could think better of it, I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around his waist. I buried my face in his chest, right over his heart. He went completely stiff, clearly shocked by the embrace. But then, slowly, his large arms came around my shoulders, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. "It's okay," I whispered against his coat. "I'm here. Let me quiet them for you." That night, for the first time, we didn't just hold hands. Kaelen laid down on my bed, fully clothed, and pulled me down beside him. He pressed my palm flat against his chest, right over his magical core, and buried his face in my neck, inhaling my scent like a drowning man finding air. My golden anchor energy flowed into him effortlessly, chasing the shadows away. From that night on, the invisible wall between us completely crumbled. Hey guys, just a quick pause in the story. If you're loving this slow burn romance and want to make sure you never miss a chapter, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below telling me your favorite moment so far. And remember, if you ever want to read ahead or listen to the spicier, uncensored bonus scenes of these stories, my Patreon, SpicyTimeBL, is the perfect place for you. The link is in the description. Alright, let's get back to Julian and Kaelen. The next 6 months were a dream I didn't want to wake up from. Kaelen changed. The cold, intimidating Apex Mage softened into someone who would buy rare books on his way home from missions just to see me smile. We started having breakfast together. He would ask about my day, about the characters in the novels I was reading. When the blight flared up, he didn't hide it anymore. He would seek me out, pulling me into his lap, resting his chin on my shoulder while my magic grounded him. The touches became lingering, a thumb brushing my cheek, a hand resting on the small of my back when we walked through the gardens. Sometimes, I would catch him staring at my lips, a dark, heavy longing in his gray eyes, but he never crossed the final line. I fell in love with him, utterly, completely, and hopelessly. I told myself that the contract didn't matter anymore, that the way he held me in the dark meant he felt it too. Then came the day I decided to surprise him. It was our 9-month mark. I had baked his favorite pastries and packed them in a box, taking a taxi to the heavily guarded military mage guild. The guards knew my face and let me through to the upper corridors. I approached Kaelen's office. The heavy oak door was slightly ajar. I raised my hand to knock, a smile already forming on my face, when I heard another voice inside. It was Commander Vance, Kaelen's handler. "You've kept that D-rank anchor around for nearly a year, Kaelen." Vance's voice was dripping with disdain. "The High Council is getting restless. You need a bonded S-rank partner to maximize your battlefield output. Are you actually getting attached to this weakling?" I froze. The pastry box felt heavy in my hands. I waited for Kaelen to defend me. I waited for him to tell Vance that I was the only one who could give him silence, that he cared for me. Kaelen's voice drifted through the crack in the door, cold, flat, unfeeling. "Don't be ridiculous, Commander. He is nothing but a temporary battery, a convenient tool, because his specific frequency happens to match my corruption. Once the contract is up, or when you finally find me a competent S-rank, I'll get rid of him. I have no attachment to a D-rank." The world stopped spinning. The air left my lungs in a violent rush. A temporary battery, a convenient tool. I'll get rid of him. The words stabbed into my chest like physical blades. My vision blurred with hot, stinging tears. I didn't drop the box. I didn't make a sound. I just took a step back, and then another, before turning and running down the corridor as fast as my legs could carry me. I don't remember the taxi ride back to the estate. I only remember the crushing, suffocating agony in my chest. I had been so stupid. I had blurred the lines, thinking a man of his status could ever love someone as broken and weak as me. I was just a contract, a job. I didn't wait for him to come home. I packed a single duffel bag with the clothes I had brought with me. I left all the expensive gifts, the rare books, the fine coats. I took a piece of stationery from the desk and wrote a single, trembling line. "The contract is terminated. Thank you for your time." I left the note on the kitchen island next to the box of pastries. Then I walked out the front door, leaving the city, the guild, and the only man I had ever loved far behind me. I used the money I had saved from my monthly allowance to buy a train ticket to the coast. I settled in a small, foggy seaside town called Oakhaven, where the salt air was thick and the magic of the capital couldn't reach me. I rented a tiny apartment above a failing tea shop, eventually taking over the lease and running the shop myself. 2 weeks after I arrived, the nausea started. the dizzy spells, the faint, fluttering warmth in my lower abdomen. I went to a local clinic. The doctor, an older woman with kind eyes, ran the tests and gave me the news that changed the trajectory of my entire universe. Male pregnancies were rare, usually only occurring between high-tier mages and their bonded anchors. But I was pregnant, 8 weeks along. I sat on the edge of the examination table, my hands pressing protectively over my flat stomach. I was carrying Kaelen's child, the child of the man who saw me as nothing but a battery. Panic and despair washed over me, but underneath it all, a fierce, undeniable wave of love rose in my chest. "We're going to be okay," I whispered to the empty room, tears falling onto my lap. "I will protect you, I promise." The pregnancy was incredibly difficult. The child's magic was already strong, drawing heavily on my weak anchor core. There were days I couldn't get out of bed, days I worked the tea shop counter while gripping the wood to stay upright. But every time I felt a tiny kick, every time a faint, glowing violet spark danced across my skin, I knew it was worth it. I gave birth during a winter storm. It was agonizing, terrifying, and beautiful. When the nurse finally laid him on my chest, my heart expanded to a size I didn't know was possible. He was tiny, with a tuft of metallic silver hair and eyes that blinked open to reveal a stunning, glowing violet. He was a perfect, miniature copy of his father. I named him Leo. 5 years passed. 5 years of hiding, of brewing tea by the sea, of raising the most incredible boy in the world. Leo was everything to me. He was bright, overly curious, and possessed a magical signature that terrified me. By the time he was 4, he had manifested dual abilities. He could summon the dark, gravity-bending magic of a void weaver, and in the next breath, he could glow with the warm, golden light of an anchor. It was unprecedented. If the guild ever found out about him, they would take him away. They would turn my beautiful boy into a weapon, a lab rat. So, I taught him to hide it. I taught him to wear sunglasses when his eyes glowed, to never lift objects with his mind, to keep his golden light locked tight inside his chest. We lived in paranoia, but we lived in peace. Until the day the past finally caught up with us. It was the day of Oakhaven's annual summer festival. The streets were packed with tourists, food stalls, and musicians. The air smelled of fried dough and salt water. I was holding Leo's hand tightly as we navigated the crowd, looking for the candy apple stand. Leo was 5 now, his silver hair hidden beneath a little blue bucket hat. He was tugging on my arm, pointing at a street magician. "Papa, look!" "Fire," he giggled. I smiled, turning to buy a token for the game booth. It took exactly 3 seconds. 3 seconds of my eyes being off him. When I turned back, my hand was empty. "Leo?" I called out, my heart giving a violent lurch. "Leo." I pushed through the dense crowd, panic rising like bile in my throat. I spun around, scanning the sea of legs and waists, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Then, the crowd parted near the edge of the pier. My breath completely stopped. My blood turned to ice. Standing 10 feet away was a man in a dark trench coat. He was taller than anyone else in the crowd, his broad shoulders and silver hair unmistakable even after 5 years. Kaelen. But that wasn't what stopped my heart. What stopped my heart was that Kaelen was looking down, frozen like a statue, staring at the little boy who was currently tugging on the hem of his coat. Leo was looking up at the giant of a man, his bucket hat knocked back, revealing his silver hair. His violet eyes were wide with innocent curiosity. And worse, I could feel it. The ambient magic in the air. Leo, sensing the chaotic, dark blight rolling off Kaelen's skin, was instinctively releasing his golden anchor energy. Kaelen's face was pale, his stormy gray eyes wide with a mixture of shock, awe, and a desperate, starving hunger, as the child's magic effortlessly silenced the void in his mind. Before Kaelen could drop to his knees, before he could reach a trembling hand out to touch Leo's silver hair, my instincts took over. "Don't touch him!" I screamed, my voice cracking with terror. Kaelen's head snapped up. Our eyes met across the distance, and the entire world simply ceased to exist. I saw the exact moment recognition hit him. I saw the breath leave his lungs. I saw 5 years of exhaustion, grief, and sudden agonizing realization crash over his face all at once. I didn't wait. I lunged forward, grabbed Leo by the waist, hoisted him into my arms, and ran. "Julian!" Kaelen's voice roared over the noise of the crowd, a sound so full of pain it made my chest ache. "Julian, wait!" I didn't stop. I ran through the alleyways, my lungs burning, tears streaming down my face. I reached the tea shop, bolted the door, locked the windows, and pulled all the curtains down. I sat on the floor of our tiny apartment, clutching a confused Leo to my chest, rocking him back and forth. "It's okay. Papa's here. Papa's here," I babbled, trying to convince myself as much as him. 10 minutes later, the heavy, thunderous knock came at the door downstairs. I didn't move. "Julian, please!" Kaelen's voice came through the thick wood, muffled but trembling. "Please open the door. I'm not going to hurt you. Just let me look at you. Please." I squeezed my eyes shut, refusing to answer. After an hour, the presence on the other side of the door faded, but I knew he hadn't gone far. The next morning, I cracked the blinds. Kaelen was sitting on a bench across the street. He looked terrible. He hadn't slept. He was just staring at the door of my shop like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth. Later that afternoon, another man approached the shop. I recognized him instantly. Silas, Kaelen's lieutenant and closest friend. He didn't knock aggressively. He just slipped a piece of paper under the door. I hesitated, then picked it up. It was a note. "Julian, please let me explain. The day you left, Kaelen nearly destroyed the guild headquarters. The conversation you heard with Commander Vance, Kaelen lied to him. Vance was threatening to use you as a hostage to control Kaelen. The council wanted to take you away to a secure facility to force Kaelen to comply with suicide missions. Kaelen insulted you to Vance to make them think you were worthless, to protect you until he could secure a way out of the military for both of you. He was going to propose to you that same night. He has spent 5 years tearing this country apart looking for you. Please." The paper slipped from my fingers. He lied to protect me. My legs gave out, and I sat hard on the floor. All this time, the heartbreak, the running, the hiding. It was built on a lie meant to save my life. Before I could even process the magnitude of the truth, the ambient magic in the room spiked violently. The teacups on the counter began to rattle. The air grew impossibly heavy, tasting of ozone and raw power. "Papa?" Leo whimpered from the corner. I looked up. Leo was clutching his head, his small body trembling. His eyes were glowing a blinding, terrifying violet. He was too young to control his dual magic under extreme emotional distress, and my panic had triggered his defense mechanisms. The window shattered. Outside, a dozen men in dark guild uniforms had surrounded the street. Vance had found us. He had tracked Kaelen. "Target the child," Vance's voice barked from the street. "His energy signature is anomalous. Secure him for the council." "No," I screamed, running toward Leo. But before I could reach him, the front door of the shop was blown completely off its hinges. Kaelen stepped through the smoke, his face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated lethal fury. His eyes weren't just glowing violet. They were black holes of absolute destruction. Shadows erupted from his body, forming massive, terrifying tendrils that shot out the broken window, wrapping around the guild soldiers and throwing them across the street like rag dolls. "You will not touch them!" Kaelen's voice was demonic, echoing with the power of 100 riffs. "You will never touch my family!" The sheer force of Kaelen's magic was tearing the building apart, and it was feeding into Leo's panic. The boy's golden and violet magic began to spiral out of control, threatening to collapse his small heart. "Kaelen!" I cried out over the roar of the magic. "Kaelen, stop! You're scaring him. He's overloading." Kaelen whipped his head around, seeing Leo crying, seeing the magic tearing at his tiny body. The rage in Kaelen's eyes vanished, replaced instantly by terror. He dropped to his knees, crawling across the glass-covered floor until he was right in front of us. He didn't know what to do. His hands hovered over Leo, shaking violently. "I don't know how to fix it," he sobbed, the Apex Mage completely breaking down. "Julian, please, I don't know how to help him." "Together," I said, grabbing Kaelen's large, scarred hand. "Give me your hand." Kaelen intertwined his fingers with mine. I reached out with my free hand and placed it flat against Leo's small, trembling chest. "Push your energy through me," I commanded. Kaelen closed his eyes and channeled his massive, chaotic magic into my core. Instead of breaking me, my anchor ability purified it, turning his terrifying void into a warm, blindingly bright golden light. I pushed that combined light directly into our sun. The effect was immediate. The chaotic storm in the room vanished. The shattered glass settled. Leo's ragged breathing slowed, and the blinding violet in his eyes faded to a soft, sleepy amber. He let out a long sigh, his head dropping forward against Kaelen's chest. Kaelen caught him, wrapping his massive arms around the tiny boy, burying his face in Leo's silver hair. He was shaking, weeping openly, holding his son for the first time in 5 years. I sat there, tears streaming down my own face, watching the man I loved hold the child we made. Slowly, Kaelen lifted his head. He looked at me, his gray eyes shining with unshed tears, vulnerability, and a love so deep it took my breath away. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I am so sorry, Julian. I only wanted to keep you safe. I was going to tell you everything. I was going to ask you to marry me. I never meant to break your heart." I reached out, my fingers trembling as I brushed a stray lock of silver hair from his forehead. The touch sent a familiar, grounding warmth through both of us. "I know," I whispered back, my voice thick with emotion. "I know why you did it, Kaelen." I read the note. "I know." He let out a ragged breath, leaning into my touch like a starving man. "I love you. I have loved you since the moment you gave me that first cup of tea. I love you, Julian. Please let me protect you both. Please let me come home." I didn't answer with words. I leaned forward, closing the space between us, and pressed my lips to his. It wasn't a rushed or desperate kiss. It was soft, hesitant at first, full of 5 years of longing, grief, and undeniable love. Kaelen's free hand came up to cup my jaw, his thumb wiping away a tear that escaped my eye. He kissed me like I was the most precious, fragile thing in the world, pouring all his unspoken apologies and promises into that single moment. When we finally pulled away, resting our foreheads together, Leo stirred in Kaelen's arms. The little boy looked up, blinking sleepily at his father. "Are you my other papa?" Leo asked, his voice tiny in the quiet room. Kaelen let out a wet laugh, a beautiful, genuine sound I hadn't heard in years. He kissed the top of Leo's head, pulling me into the embrace so the three of us were tangled together on the floor of the ruined tea shop. "Yes, little one," Kaelen whispered, holding us both so tightly I knew he would never, ever let us go again. "I'm your papa, and I am never leaving you again." The storm was finally over. The shadows were gone, and for the first time in my life, my mind was perfectly, beautifully quiet. Thank you all so much for listening to today's story. If this emotional, slow-burn romance touched your heart, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share the video with your friends. It really helps the channel grow. And a quick reminder, if you want to see what happens next, including Kaelen and Julian's wedding, their honeymoon, and all the spicy, uncensored 18+ bonus scenes of their reunited life together, head on over to my Patreon, SpicyTimeBL. The link is right there in the description. My heavenly angels, let's meet again in the next video with another beautiful story. Stay safe and stay romantic.